Joseph Parker is a name who's cropping up more and more regularly when people are discussing the heavyweight division. He is somebody who is constantly talked about on forums as the next big thing, and he's getting to a stage now where the rankings are starting to take note of him. He is ranked number 15 by one of the major four governing bodies. BoxRec have got him ranked number 30 in their heavyweight lists. He's someone who's going to become more of a name in the next year or two, and it looks likely he's going to be facing some real named opponents in the next year to 2 years. So, bit of background on him. He's a Kiwi boxer from New Zealand. He's about 6'4". He's a big guy. Most importantly, he's 22 years of age. He turned pro after failing to make the Olympics in 2012. So he's been pro for about 2 years now. He's had 10 fights, won them all, 9 of them by knockout. He's looked quite a big power puncher in his early stage of his career. Been kept fairly busy, I guess you could say. And he's got a fight booked in coming up against Sherman Williams, who's, I guess you could say, a bit of a name in terms of being an opponent these days, really. In terms of Joseph Parker's record, the fighters he's been in with, there's actually some reasonable names considering he's in his first 10 fights. Some names people may recognise: Brian Minto, Nascimento, the Brazilian heavyweight. Interestingly, Nascimento is billed to fight Eddie Chambers in his next fight. So, that's a positive for Joseph Parker, that in his 10 fights he's already taken on someone who's going to be due out to face, and it's a heavyweight as experienced as Eddie Chambers. So it's Brian Minto, Nascimento, Franz Botha. Obviously, you could say quite a faded Franz Botha. But 3 heavyweights, 3 sort of guys who are known to the boxing hardcore. He won all 3 of those fights by stoppage. At certain times, he's been in with opponents who have shown at least a level of durability, so we say, and he's taken care of business. With Brian Minto, for example, he stopped him in 7. Brian Minto went 10 with Arthur Spicker, who, Brian Minto took Spicker the distance, who's due to fight Adamek. Parker was able to get the stoppage win over him. Nascimento, another heavyweight, I know he's been blasted out by the likes of Tyson Fury, those sort of guys, but he's been the distance. In a few fights, he got taken into round 8 by Manuel Char, who's known as a big puncher. Parker got rid of him on the 7th. So there's some form lines to suggest that Parker's punching power isn't just because he's facing a very, very low level of opposition, but is actually relevant. Some of the form lines through the opponents he's faced are relevant, and it suggests he could actually carry that power into facing named contenders. I think the other thing to think about is he's a big guy. He's 6'4". He's naturally a heavyweight, and he's aged 22. He's still a baby in terms of the heavyweight division. Where guys are peaking late 20s, 30s even. So his power is only going to develop and get more. So the fact that he's knocking out these opponents aged 22 really suggests that he is a big puncher. I've watched quite a few of his fights. He seems to carry power in both hands. He's got a big right hand, really big right hand. But that's not to say his left hand's weak. He's not a one-handed fighter. He throws a good left-hand lead, a good left-hand hook, so he carries threat from both sides. He can also punch to the body. He doesn't do it as often as I'd like, but he throws a good body shot. He throws a powerful punch down, and I think there's quite a lot of facets to his power. It's not just a right-hand cross, if you like, which you'll see in his highlight reel if you search him on YouTube. So I do have a few reservations about the guy, which I'll touch on in a minute, but age 22, I think I'm fairly impressed. I'm fairly impressed with the level of opposition he's been in with for his first 10 fights. and he's got some decent assets, good power. He works the head, works the body. He's got two hands. He's got a decent jab, and he's someone with certainly future and a lot of potential. His next fight, as I mentioned, is against Sherman Williams. That's quite an interesting matchup. Williams tends to lose these days when in against the high class of opposition, so I don't expect him to trouble Parker in terms of, potentially getting a victory or getting a draw. But if we look at Sherman Williams' recent fights, he went the distance in a losing effort with Gerald Washington. Same again with Robert Helenius. Same again with Manuel Charr. Same again with Ruslan Chagayev. So these are four fighters who'd all probably be rated a lot higher than Joseph Parker at present. Some punches in there, Washington's got a good knockout record. Robert Helenius is known as a big puncher. People may know that I don't have the highest opinion of Chagayev, but nonetheless he's a highly rated fighter, as is Manuel Charr. So if Parker can go out and score a stoppage against Sherman Williams, I will be impressed, and that would suggest that he is genuinely a massive puncher. So that's one to watch out. It's a fight. I don't know. I believe it's scheduled over 12 rounds. So it's good. That's his second 12-round fight, and it's good that he's getting in these fights so early on in his career. And I'm impressed by that. I've read online, unconfirmed, should he be successful as we expect against Sherman Williams, his next fight after that will be against Freza Oquendo. I have read a conflicting report that's saying Oquendo's going to fight a rematch against Chagayev for the WBA regular, but it kind of says just how highly Parker is being thought about by his people. The fact that they're talking a match against Oquendo who fought his last fight for the WBA regular. Now I know you could say Oquendo is, way past it. That WBA title fight he had in his last match was an awful fight against, a paper champion. Whatever. The fact of the matter is, we're talking about a guy here who's had 10 pro fights, age 22, and he's looking at his next fight after Williams being a guy who fought for the WBA title in his last match. So I like the level of opposition so far. I think he'll beat Williams. I think he'll beat Oquendo if they fight, and that's not bad names for his record after 12 fights. If you look at the likes of Minto, Franz Bofa, Nascimento, these guys have been in with some good fighters, so I'm impressed by that side. And I've mentioned that the guy does have a lot of attributes which I like. Decent hand speed, decent above average power, etc. Now, in terms of perhaps my slight reservations, I think this guy has potential, he has talent. There is a slight risk he could be rushed too far. As I say, I like Williams, I like Nascimento, I like Oquendo as a right level of opposition, but should he be successful at that opposition, I'd like him to stick there for a year or two before moving up and fighting the real big guys of the division, because I think there are a few things that could be worked on. He throws a good jab. Parker's jab is nice. He doesn't throw it regularly enough though. He often seems to fight in close, a bit wildly, like inside fighting, hook swinging. It's got better in his more recent fights, but previously there has been a tendency to leave himself open defensively, to take shots back from opponents he didn't need to take shots from, to get involved in brawls, inside barring brawl types. I'd like to see him using that jab he's got more. He's a big guy, he's a strong guy. If he really worked on that jab and implemented it in his fights, it would be a big assistance. A good example of this would be in a fight he had against a guy with an unbelievably good name. I'll just pull it up here. I think it was something like King Afa Tatupu or something of that nature, but it was for the New Zealand heavyweight title. He was a guy who Parker was leagues above in terms of ability. You could see it just in the way they looked, in the way they moved, in the way they threw. But Parker sustained a real nasty cut against him, and it was because he got involved in one of these brawl type fights totally needlessly. I'd like to see him working on that jab more. As I mentioned earlier, I've also been really impressed with the fact that he's a two-handed fighter and he can throw to the body as well as the head. I'd like to see him using that a bit more, specifically with the body punching. He throws a real nice left hook to the body, and I think that's something that he underuses. He relies too much on his power in this barroom brawl thing. I'd like to see him taking his time, not rushing in, not getting involved in an inside brawl where he could get cut, he could get head-butted, anything like that could happen. I'd like to see him using the boxing skills a bit more to sort of control the centre of the ring, throwing a strong jab, working the body, and going about it that way.